Hey, y'all. So this week on the Speak the Language podcast, we are joined by Michael Hunter, who is a chef based out of Toronto. He's a super nice guy, avid outdoorsman, very interesting to talk to. We talk about hunting, fishing, wild game cooking, wild foraging, and then hands down my favorite part of the podcast is Michael actually owns a restaurant in Toronto, and he had some issues last March with animal rights activists protesting right in front of his restaurant, and the way he dealt with them is it's quite humorous and quite effective, if I do say so myself. So I think you'll enjoy this episode. And lastly, if you enjoy this podcast, do us a favor, head to iTunes, give us a rating, write us a review. Hope you enjoy the show. All right, so this week on the podcast, I'm joined by Michael Hunter. And man, first off, like you're probably when I started following you on Instagram on the Primos page, and you have. Yep. You're probably one of the most interesting Instagram pages for me, I guess, because I'm a big fan of food. And I just thought you had a really cool story and just an interesting guy, and I wanted to have you on the show. So first off, before we get into anything, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come on and talk with us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So I kind of had an idea of stuff I wanted to talk to you about, but I was getting ready yesterday and looking over some stuff, and I saw you had an Instagram story posted, and that's when I heard about it was a tragic thing, I guess. There was that, the Toronto Raptors just won the championship, and I guess it was at the parade yesterday. There was a shooting.
Yeah, there was multiple shootings, and for me, it's just pretty upsetting because my son was there with some of his friends from school.
Oh wow!
And there's just been a number of gun crimes on the rise in the major cities, and it's a pretty polarized topic right now in Canada, considering we already have really strong gun control measures.
Right. So, like, what's I'm not familiar with the laws up there, So I mean, obviously, these guys that were doing the shooting weren't licensed to be carrying what they were carrying.
Yeah, so from my understanding, Canada has some of the strongest gun control laws in the world, and I think a lot of them are actually beneficial. So to get a firearms license in Canada, I think you start off with what's called a non-restricted license, and that's basically for your long guns, hunting rifles, shotguns,
right?
Basically, target shooting rifles, things like that, and you have to take a safety course, pass a written test, and pass a practical test before you can get your license. I think that part's great. I think that gun safety and courses about learning how to use firearms and use them safely, I think they're great. I think that's a great tool
right.
For people to have to do. Police do background checks, before you get your license, and then as far as I know, that you have your name gets run daily in the police system to make sure that you don't have any outstanding or new criminal charges.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. But the problem that we're having now is that gun crime is on the rise. But compared to the States, we're still really low. I think in 2018 there was something like around 300 homicide deaths or deaths by firearms, which is actually pretty low as a whole country
right.
Is considered. And our current government, that's a Democratic government, is passed a bill to restrict our gun laws even more. So, and the problem is that these criminals and people that are shooting each other, they don't have gun licenses. They're not following the rules. They're not allowed to carry handguns in public.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly frustrating because they're not following the laws anyway. So they're just creating more laws and more restrictions on legal firearm owners, and they're not targeting the real problem, which is crime and criminals. They're not giving them harsher sentences for firearms violations. People get arrested for these crimes and they get slapped on the wrist, or they get let go and they get let out on bail and they commit crimes again. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's got to be something that hits home with you, with that occurring so close to you, and then you being a hunter, and that's the same argument, because we when you hear gun control arguments here in the U.S., it's kind of the same deal. Like, well, if you create these strict gun laws, it's not like you're going to take guns away from the people that are doing the illegal stuff anyway. So it just seems backwards, man. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
And I forgot to mention that I only talked about the one part of our licensing. The second part of our licensing is to do with restricted firearms, which are handguns and short barrel rifles. So an AR-15 is considered a restricted firearm.
Right.
So handguns and restricted firearms can only be used at a range. You're not allowed to target shoot in your backyard, or if you have a farm, you can't plink cans with a little .22 pistol, even in your backyard.
That's crazy.
Our rules are already very strict when it comes to handguns.
Yeah.
And right now, our mayor of Toronto is asking the government to ban handguns in the city. And if you really look at the laws, handguns are already banned in the city. You're not allowed to take them out of your house. You're only allowed to transport them to a range. They have to be in a case that's locked, and the gun itself has to have a trigger lock when you're transporting it.
Yeah.
So it's already really strict, and the people that are caught with guns, they're just released on bail, and it's pretty sad.
Yeah, man, I guess that's a completely different world from over here. Down here we've got concealed carry laws and permits that you can get for all that kind of stuff. Man, that's wild. It's so sad that happened too. Especially obviously the NBA championship getting won is great for Toronto, and it's just hate that something like that would happen, put a damper on that. But golly,
it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I think one of the victims was just a kind of innocent woman that was a bystander. So it's terrible. And I think our police need better tools funded by the government to really crack down on this issue.
Absolutely. Like 100%, absolutely. That's heartbreaking. It really is. Huh. Well, man, I hate, like I said, I usually don't like to start podcast episodes on a negative note, but you can't, that's something you can't just ignore it, and that happened, and it's very current. Yeah, it's very current. So, it needed to be spoken about, especially, chance to maybe get the word out about it some. But I guess let's take a turn on the topics that talk about something a little bit more positive. So, like I said, you're an interesting guy, and I think it'd be safe to say that your interest in hunting and fishing in the outdoors kind of led a lot to what you do today. So tell me a little bit about, your background in hunting and fishing and everything.
So I guess it really just started as a kid. I grew up in the country on a horse farm, and my parents are English descent, and I grew up fox hunting on horseback with hounds, and that was really my introduction to hunting. I grew up on a farm. We had a pond, so fishing was something I did almost every day as a kid. I was always swimming in the pond or catching crayfish, and we had largemouth bass in the pond. So it was just being in the outdoors was part of my upbringing. But really, hunting for food didn't start till I was about 19 and going to chef school, and I was really getting interested in where my food was coming from. Mm-hmm. I was starting to pick mushrooms at the restaurant I was working at. We worked across the street from this huge provincial park, and we were on our break at the restaurant going and hiking in the woods and finding all these mushrooms and wild plants and things that we could buy from specialty companies, but we were finding them in our backyard and bringing them to the restaurant and cooking with them. And I thought that this was pretty amazing. And the more I was learning about it, the more I started to realize that this isn't new. It's people have been hunting and gathering for since the beginning of time to survive, and it's just something that seems to be forgotten about in this time in our lives. And it wasn't until I started hanging out and chatting with the huntsman of the hounds from this fox hunting club that he told me that he was going turkey hunting, and I didn't even know there was wild turkeys in Canada. I thought that was pretty amazing. Yeah. And he took me turkey hunting for the first time, and it was when I got to experience tasting wild turkey for the first time I was able to compare it to, growing up eating farm-raised turkey at Christmas and Thanksgiving and all those holidays. I couldn't believe the difference in flavor.
Yeah.
So I think as a chef, as a young chef, my eyes were just completely opened, and I didn't want to be eating kind of farmed-raised meat anymore, because I just thought that wild meat was healthier and eating what it's supposed to and living a happy life out in nature.
Yeah, for sure, man. And, not to sound like cliche or, you hear it a lot these days. But I mean, I can attest to it. Like you say, you eat like the store-bought turkey that you have at your family gathering at Thanksgiving. You compare that to, a turkey that not was just, got out of the wild, but one that you worked for yourself. There really is no comparison to the feeling of it, to the taste of it, everything. Yeah. I had a firsthand experience with it. And I've told this story on this podcast, I don't know how many times now, but my mother had never killed a deer up until 2 years ago. And
wow.
Just so I took her out. She never really had, her story was that, the family she was raised in, the men hunted, she was raised around it, but she never went herself. And so she's just like, I want to go. Right. And so we went out, we shot a doe, killed it. And then I can remember when she ate it, and she's like, it literally tastes different to me because I got this myself. Yeah. And I was like, that's, I'm sorry, what?
No, sorry to interrupt, but I just say, it tastes so much better when you've put in all that work and effort, and you know exactly, how it died and, the life that animal had, and you got to see that firsthand. It makes an incredible difference.
Oh, exactly. And like, I don't want to say I was desensitized to it, but I guess because I'd been around it so much, I'd forgotten what it was like for someone who, that was their first time, because, Mama had deer before, but she never had one that she got herself. And I could see, that difference. And it was, I got it. I was like, this is really, this is how, and that's why it's so special. That's why I think that. Tell me about like the foraging thing, the mushrooms and stuff that intrigues me. I wish I could say that I'm not even a novice level at that. The most I know about foraging is I know morel mushrooms. That's about it. But that's so cool to me that you do that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I still consider myself a novice. There's so many, in terms of mushrooms, like millions of varieties of things, and it's, it can be kind of a scary subject, especially growing up as kids, and you tell your kids, don't eat mushrooms. They're poisonous. They can make you sick, because some of them can, and there's a lot of them that can. And there are a few varieties that will kill you fairly quickly. They'll shut down your liver and your organs will fail. And by the time you feel you have a stomach ache, it's over. So, but it's definitely a very fascinating topic. There's lots of books. One of them that I started with was called the Audubon Society, a guide to mushrooms in North America. That is a great reference with lots of color pictures, and really gets into the science and the different types of mushrooms and the different families there are. So that was a great sort of learning tool for me. And then there's just a number of other books that are sort of scientific guides, but also foraging related. They will talk about edibility and the habitat and where they grow and the things to look for. And I guess the most important one are poisonous lookalikes. So morels are pretty safe because there is a lookalike. It's called a false morel. But even if you were to eat them, you might get an upset stomach, but it's not going to kill you.
Right.
So there is lots of mushrooms that really, like puffballs, they don't really have any poisonous lookalikes, so they're pretty safe to eat. There's a mushroom called a pheasant back or a dryad saddle.
Yeah.
They don't really have any lookalikes, so they're pretty safe to start learning. So, I guess my advice to anyone interested in the subject is just, buy some books. There's some great groups on Facebook where you can get started, and post pictures and ask people questions. And, really just educate yourself and start reading.
Yeah. So did you start doing that? Like you start doing that when you started doing like chef school, or did you kind of start that when you were younger?
No, well, I remember when I was younger, we had a school trip. I grew up in the country, like I said, so we went to kind of a rural farm community kind of school. So I think we went to a sugar bush, and we're learning about maple syrup. And in the spring, the wild leeks or ramps are sort of the first things to pop out of the ground, and they're like a wild onion or like wild garlic. And so I remember as a kid, picking those in the woods, and our whole school bus just stank like onion breath. So that was sort of my earliest memory of foraging. But and now something that I do with my kids, we go, we tap maple trees in the end of the winter, and then when the snow melts, we start picking wild leeks, and then the morels come out. So it's something that I've kind of passed on to my children. But I got started because I worked in restaurants. We could buy this sort of exotic stuff that was local. And I just started to look for it. So I would, talk to the chefs that I worked with. One of them went mountain biking and then kind of just rode by a big morel patch and brought them in. And I got really excited about it. And I went and just started looking for them. So that was, morels was really my intro to foraging when I was, I think, probably 18.
Yeah. I see. That's something that I could easily get, like that I could see myself trying to get into, because I say morels is like the one that I know, but I didn't know much about morels until like these past years when I started traveling during the spring. With Primos, down in the South we don't really have morels, so
right.
And I think it was just this past, like it was this spring, like I think it was like last month we ate turkey from a turkey we killed in Minnesota, and we ate it with morel mushrooms, and it was just, I was like, because
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. But goes back to what we were saying. I was kind of used to eating wild turkey, but I'd never had wild turkey also with the mushrooms or whatever I was eating with it was gathered from the wild too. I was like, man, this is incredible. It really was. Like it was so enjoyable. The Primos Takeout Seed and Feed System. Hands down effective, easy to use, and you will see results. Head on over to Primos.com and receive free shipping on takeout products for orders of $75 and more.
One of the restaurant photos we have hanging on the wall at Antler is a picture of this giant blown up picture of this forest with wild leeks all along the forest floor. And I actually took that turkey hunting. So in our turkey seasons in May, and the wild leeks and morels are just popping up everywhere. So my favorite thing is to stuff a turkey breast with wild leeks, morels, and goat cheese stuffing.
Oh, so that let's entertain my ignorance to the subject for a second. You say a wild leek. I honestly could act like I go along with it, like I know what that is. I have no clue what that is.
So they're also called ramps. And it kind of looks like a green onion, but the leaves are, instead of like one stalk coming up, it's like two big green broadleaf leaves. And it has a bulb like a green onion, but it's a little bit rounder at the very bottom where the root is. And it kind of tastes like a cross between onion and garlic.
Okay.
And they grow wild kind of all over I think it's more eastern states and provinces.
Right.
But if you Google ramps, RAMPS, or wild leeks, it should pop up. And in the spring, it's turkey season. They're abundant. They grow everywhere. But they're sort of a sensitive plant. If you'll see a patch that's maybe like 10 to 20 feet in diameter. Mm-hmm. You're only supposed to pick like a 10% kind of corner of the patch so that it can regrow for next year. Because if you were to say pick the entire patch, they wouldn't grow back. They're all connected kind of as a root system, and they don't go to seed very often, or the seeds don't take very well. So it's
right.
There's actually the province of Quebec. They've actually banned foraging for them because people have sort of picked them all. So they're trying to protect that species. Yeah, and I think there's some places in the States where I was reading where you have to buy a license to forage them. So it's sort of an interesting subject.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's very interesting. Another thing that that I thought was cool is you incorporate the foraging stuff into the restaurant that you operate now, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty special. Where legally we can we're not allowed to bring in wild game that we hunt.
Right.
It's similar to the rules in the States. But what we are allowed to do is go foraging or buy from local foragers and introduce that wild stuff into the menu. And sort of educate people a little bit about where, what's local in Ontario and in Canada where we are.
Yeah. So let me backtrack a little bit. I got a little. I guess I got excited talking about the foraging stuff because it interests me so much. But so the Antler restaurant that you own now, how long have you had that?
So we've been around. It'll be 4 years this September.
Gotcha. So I'm imagining, I could be absolutely wrong here, but I'm imagining your menu with the all that is probably fairly unique. Am I right about that?
Yeah, we're, I think, probably the only restaurant in Toronto anyway that is exclusively a wild game and wild fish focused restaurant.
Yeah. So that's man, like for one, if I ever find myself in Toronto, I'm coming to eat there. Just letting you know that on the forefront. But yeah, so
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I said. I was skimming through the Instagram page yesterday. I was like, good gracious, this all looks delicious. So how it's so cool to me, like just everything. So I guess all that do y'all stay pretty seasonal? I guess you have to with the different mushrooms and stuff that are.
Yeah, we have to. We in terms of the wild fish, there are seasons that we have to adhere to unless we want to serve frozen stuff. So we work with fishermen on sort of all three coasts, as well as fish from the Great Lakes.
Right.
And it is kind of strange that we're allowed to buy and sell wild fish, but we're not allowed to buy and sell wild game. So it's kind of my theory is everyone has the right to eat it. So yeah. I'm a kind of an advocate for trying to change these laws, but. And then mushrooms and stuff like that. Yeah, we are fairly seasonal because the country is so big. We can we buy from foragers in BC all the way to the East Coast as well. So we are pretty lucky that we're such a big place.
Yeah, that's wildly cool. That's so cool to me. I'm not trying to harp on it, but I just kept looking at the menu, looking at the pictures. Like, man, this is cool. Like, this is the coolest restaurant that I know of. Which brings me to another point. I'm sure. I said if I know this was what was it the protest deal with the animal rights guys. It's been over a year ago now, correct?
So yeah, about a year and a half ago, we had some pretty angry people outside our door that we really didn't agree with. What they were saying and what they wanted us to do, which was basically change our whole menu into a vegan restaurant, which is it's bizarre to me because we embrace, all forms of diets. If you were a vegan and came to our restaurant, we have a couple options already on the menu.
Okay.
And we're always willing to do, something vegan, off the cuff for somebody if they want to try something different. And, a lot of people have different diets for religious reasons and things like that. So we welcome everyone into the restaurant.
Right.
And, we had a chalkboard sign out front and someone wrote, "Venison is the new kale." And which, was kind of clever for us because I think venison's really healthy. It's a lean meat and really high in protein and
right.
Low in fat. And, we're just trying to be fun and have some fun. And some cyclists riding by took incredible offense to that, and they already were an animal rights activists, where they protest at slaughterhouses and things like that. So
right.
All of a sudden one day they just showed up on our doorstep with all these signs and they claimed to be peaceful protesters, but they weren't really peaceful. They're banging on our windows, they're screaming at our customers and being everything but peaceful.
Right.
So we really had to put up with that for quite a while. They were all in all, they were at our restaurant once a week for 11 months.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's hard to call, and it's hard to call yourself peaceful when you're yelling at people trying to walk in and get their dinner. Good gracious.
Yeah.
11 months.
So
I had no idea it carried on that long.
Yeah, so I would leave when they were coming because I knew that I was upsetting to me and I knew that I would do something stupid. So the nights that they were coming, I would just leave. And the one night I had to be there, I forget, someone else was off or sick, or I had to be there that night. And I got so upset when I saw someone coming in the restaurant, and it was a couple, and the woman looked like she was about to cry. She was just being yelled at, people calling her a murderer.
Goodness.
And that's when I just really lost my temper. We buy whole deer once a month from a local farmer.
Mm-hmm.
I should mention, all of our game is farms. So,
right.
We had a deer delivery that morning, and I went downstairs and took off one of the back legs and put it down in the front window. And my sort of protest against them was I butchered and dejointed the back leg in the window for them.
Which is awesome, by the way. Like I was talking to Jimmy this morning, Jimmy Primos, and he was like, "You recording a podcast today?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "With who?" I said, "You hear that?" I said, "You probably heard the story. It's that guy who had those animal rights activists protesting in front of his restaurant, so he butchered a deer leg and he lit up like a Christmas tree." He said, "Oh, yeah, I love that guy. He should be cool."
So, because we really couldn't do much. People have the right to protest. People have the right to freedom of speech and things like that, which is important. But they're really just misguided in their efforts. One of my sort of problems with what they were doing is they weren't really inspiring anybody.
Right.
Yelling at people to inspire change really causes an opposite reaction. People want to fight back.
Yeah.
So,
especially when they're getting called a murderer.
Yeah, and the whole reason why I hunt is so I don't have to buy animals that go through the federal slaughterhouse system, because I don't agree with it. So I think the thing they don't understand is we have similar views, and they're really just protesting the wrong people. I agree with them. I think our slaughterhouses need reform. I think the government needs to maybe clean them up or make the process a little safer for the animals, or I'm not really sure, but coming after small businesses isn't the way to inspire change. If they want to inspire change, it should be on, Parliament Hill, where the people make the laws, and try and go to the root of the problem, not go after small independent business owners.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's just so like the way they do it, and it's not just not just your incidents at your restaurant. Every time, I can't say, I'm sure there's probably some that are there, but all the protests that I've seen they're hard to qualify as peaceful. Like I said, even if they're not screaming, it's just whatever they have on the signs is just so combative. I'm like you're, to your point, like who are you going to change or persuade in your direction if you're calling them murderers? It's just, it doesn't make much sense to me. It's
no.
Yeah.
And the thing was, we would have customers go outside and try and have a debate, an educated debate with them, or an intellectual dialogue, and they would just scream profanity. They were not interested in having a conversation. They're angry and they want to scream, and that was really the gist of it.
Yeah. It's hard. You can't argue with somebody like that. I mean, you really can't.
No.
You can't. I mean, there's no logic there. You can't explain anything. So is that, do you still have? Do they still protest today, or do that kind of go out?
No. Well, the media attention was so huge, and it was so one-sided. All the media articles were really supportive towards Antler. And I think, they kind of realized they lost the battle with Antler, and the same group actually is still protesting, but they've moved on to a local butcher shop, unfortunately. So they're this little butcher shop now is getting the brunt of their protesting, and they're still, they go once a week, and the funny thing is that they kind of put up with it. They went inside their butcher shop pretending to be, paying customers, and then staged this big theatrical performance where they pretended to slit everyone's throat, and they poured fake blood on themselves and laid on the floor and put these big barcode stickers on themselves. Like, they're just totally nuts.
That doesn't even sound like it sounds like that kid you go to middle school, that you were in middle school with, that just acted out because he wanted attention. That's what that sounds like. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It doesn't sound like you're not accomplishing anything. You're really not.
No.
Gracious, that poor butcher.
Are. They get attention, and even though it's negative attention, they still like it. So they think that just by getting their message out there that they're winning. So it's unfortunate, but
Well,
and for us, what we had to hire private security that was trained in dealing with these types of things. So if they were to try that in our restaurant, they'd be thrown out. And legally, if someone's trespassing and you ask them to leave and they don't, you're allowed to throw them out.
Right.
The police were also the Toronto police were also great in working with us and making sure everybody was safe. And they gave our staff some training and us as the owner some training on how to deal with it if they were to come inside and be violent. So
right.
And the police were always out front, being supportive. And kind of trying to keep them in line.
Yeah. Well, being a fan of you and what you do and your values, I'm glad that the press and the stories, everything came out was to your favor and that everything was handled like that. And then I'm also glad that you don't have to deal with it anymore. I feel bad for that butcher that's dealing with them now, but I'm glad you don't have to anymore.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So tell me this, I was, we were talking about doing this podcast, and when I initially contacted you, you were down in West Point at the time,
right?
And
yep.
You've done some hunting with those guys at Mossy Oak, have you not?
I have, yeah. So Daniel Hayes reached out to me on Twitter one day. One of the themes at our restaurant is camo. So I had been looking for a long time for a camouflage apron because I hunt, and my last name is Hunter. I thought it was pretty cool. And I found a local apron guy called Woven Grain. Mm-hmm. And he was making custom aprons with like leather straps and kind of fancy looking stuff. And I wrote him and said, I'm looking for a camouflage apron. No one really has one, or no one will make one for me. He said, okay, let me look around, see what I can do. And he wrote me back, said, yeah, I found one. It's going to cost this much. Like, I'm going to play around with a design. I hope you like it. So the apron that he sent me was my Mossy Oak breakup pattern that I wear. I have these coveralls that are Mossy Oak, and the apron was the exact same pattern. So I was like, blown away. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. And then on the back of it, he made it blaze orange. So
that's cool.
Like, this is so cool. It was so special for me because it was what I had been wearing hunting for 10 years. I've been wearing these coveralls. And so when we opened Antler, we had our restaurant staff in the kitchen outfitted with these aprons. And I was starting to do these kind of big events and special dinners and stuff like that. And I found Mossy Oak on Instagram and Twitter, so I tag him in the post. And I guess Daniel manages the social media.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he reached out to me one day and just said, hey, do you want to come hang out and cook with us? We're trying to do some wild game videos. And that was really my introduction to Mossy Oak was through social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's some like you said, I've heard. Social media while social media can have some negatives, it definitely has some positives, because you hear a lot of more and more stories like that where people are you're genuinely meeting good people through social media, and all the Mossy Oak guys, Mossy Oak and Primos has always been tight with each other, and they're great guys. And Daniel, he does great at all the social media stuff. The thing that interests me is I want to know your opinion. Or what your thoughts are on the differences between hunting where you grew up in Canada versus hunting in the South down where we are. I'm sure there's got to be some stark differences there.
You know what? It's pretty similar. You guys have way more deer than we do, so that's I'm a bit jealous of that.
Yeah.
But the countryside. In Mississippi really looks a lot similar to where I grew up.
Really?
There's a lot of kind of rolling hills. Yeah, it's pretty flat, but there's still kind of rolling hills and lots of green pasture. And, we have hardwood forests and pine forests and stuff like that. So it's actually, the countryside looks really similar. But what I love most about the South is just the people. When I came down there, I just said, I feel like I'm at home. Like, I found my people, and it was, they all laughed and stuff. And I would just say, like, you hear about Southern hospitality, and then until you experience it for the first time, you don't know what it means. And it really, the people just make you feel like family, and everyone's, family values and morals, and everyone's just so nice. And I fell in love with it. Yeah,
it's a special place for sure. Like, I was fortunate enough to be born and raised here, but traveling around, it's obvious to me that it is a special place, and I do love it dearly, man. Have you ever? I know you said something about doing some hog hunts. Have you been able to do that yet?
Yeah, so I think it was the first or second time that I came down. They took me on a hog hunt where they tracked him and put him down with the dogs.
Right.
So that was definitely a different style of hunting. Well, it was different for me because it was it ended up in eating the hog, but most of the hunting I had done at the time was, spot and stalk kind of deer hunting, or sitting in a tree stand, or, duck hunting in a blind. So I found the hog hunting with the hounds, really interactive, and, really way to get out hiking. And so that I found really exciting. I guess it kind of reminded me of the fox hunting I did as a kid.
Yeah.
Using kind of hounds to chase and locate, the animal.
Yeah. And that, hog hunting in itself is, in the South, it's one, I mean, people do it as a pastime, they do it as an enjoyable thing, but it's like a hog hunting in the South, between the hunting and the trapping and that, it's a necessity down here because they're so destructive and there's so many of them,
Yeah. And I got to see that firsthand, seeing some of the crops on the Mossy Oak properties, and seeing all the corn that was ripped up and the soybeans that are ripped up, and, like the whole, back end of the field, like a third of their crop was ripped up from these hogs.
Oh,
and, yeah. I definitely see why it's, sort of a necessary evil, is, to try to manage them and get rid of them.
Yeah, man, they're terrible. I mean, they're honestly, they're terrible. I have a cousin that farms here, and he has to trap constantly, or they'll destroy his crop. I mean, like 100%. It's not a game. I mean, he hunts them, recreationally sometimes, but like he has to run traps or they'll kill his livelihood. It's crazy. It's we're fortunate, the place that we do, Cottonmouth is the place where we hunt on the Mississippi River. That's where we film all of our deer and waterfowl shows. We're fortunate there. Yep. I think the whole time that we've been there, I've seen like 2 or 3 hogs killed off the place. They don't seem to like, it's inside in the levees in the levee system, and they don't seem to like that fluctuating water. So we've never really had to deal with them. Yeah. But that's what you need to come do next. You need to come down to Cottonmouth and see that style of hunting, because there's hunting in the South, and then there's hunting on the river. It's a different world over there. It's crazy cool. It really is.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm serious, man. You need to come do it. I think, especially I could talk Jimmy into letting you come if I said that you would cook. Yep. I'm pretty sure, because he. Yeah,
absolutely, man. That's a given. I love cooking, so for me it's not a chore. People sometimes say, I hate to ask you to cook, or do you feel bad having to cook? And it's like, I love it. And and people ask me, do you cook at home? And that's all I'm doing at home is cooking, with my kids. I try to get my kids involved, but, I want to eat, healthy, good stuff at home. So,
yeah.
It's just what I love to do. We have a little garden as well. And, I love cooking outside, on a barbecue or over an open fire. It's really the best.
Yeah. That's cool, man. It's so cool. It's always nice, or for me, it's always nice to see, good guys succeed. And you see a person like you that has the, like I said, the values that they have for hunting and the outdoors, and obviously your love for cooking, and then you've been able to make that, into how you make a living, and that's incredible, man. That's good for you. Good for you, really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's fun. I wouldn't advise, a lot of people to get into the culinary industry. The first, I would say the first 10 years are rough. It's one of those trades that really aren't rewarded fairly, considering, if you were to go to school for another type of trade, like an electrician or a plumber or construction, it's financially, it's not a real rewarding career for the first 10 years,
right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Even after the apprentice program, an apprentice electrician makes a lot more money than an apprentice cook, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I'm at a point now, like I started cooking so young. When I was 13, I had my first job as a short order cook in a diner. So, now after having 20 plus years of experience, it's starting to pay off.
Yeah. You've been doing this a while then. That's awesome, man. It really is. Tell me this. So like, as far as, I want the folks that listen to this to be able to follow along with you. So you do, I know you have the Instagram, you active on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Yeah, so all of the handles are at the Hunter Chef. The restaurant is Antler Kitchen Bar, and that can be found. Same thing, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And yeah, anytime anyone's coming through the city, we'd love to have you. We got a lot of visitors. We're actually not that far from Buffalo. It's about an hour and a half drive to the border to Niagara.
Okay.
So we get a lot of visitors from like Michigan, Detroit, Buffalo. People drive up, from Vermont to New York. It's pretty cool. We got a lot of American friends. So
yeah,
just want to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, I'm telling you, I'm not bluffing. If I'm ever even close to the area, you can expect to see me come in there to eat.
Absolutely. I'll take you hunting if it's in the right season.
Oh man, yeah. Now you're speaking my language.
Because even though we're in the city about an hour, my deer hunting spot's about an hour from the city, and then duck hunting is about an hour and a half away. So
oh, awesome.
Any time you're welcome to come out and hang out.
Awesome, man. I truly appreciate it, and again, man, thank you for taking the time to come on today. I mean, I know you got to be a pretty busy guy, so I appreciate it. Guys,
well,
also,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. It's always nice to have good folks on. So guys that are listening, for sure, go follow him on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, like, seriously, I'll look at every time he posts a picture of anything. I'm always, usually licking my chops because it looks good. And yeah, I hope if you have any questions, as always, send them into the Primos Facebook or Instagram page. And that's all for today. Thank you all for listening.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.